I never thought that one of the most challenging circumstances of my life would result from my decision to study in Paris. I was 25 years old and had just started a master's degree in French literature at one of the city's most prominent colleges. Paris was lovely, lively, and full of life, everything I could have imagined. It was meant to be a new beginning, a new chapter. I had no idea that this city of love would draw me into an emotional maze I had never anticipated. I'm Camille, and I was raised in a little southern French village. It was like entering a different planet when I moved to Paris. It was overwhelming and thrilling, with its busy streets, stunning architecture, and feeling of history. Living in a little apartment in the Latin Quarter, focusing on my academics and interacting with individuals from different backgrounds made me very happy. Professor Julien Moreau was one of the individuals I met. He was a 48-year-old man of distinction who was known as one of the university's top professors. He possessed a commanding presence with his piercing blue eyes, strong jawline, and salt and pepper hair. In his discussion of literature, he was affable, wise, and utterly captivating. One could not help but be attracted to him. I initially adored him from afar. Something about the way he looked at me during lectures, the way his eyes would linger on mine a bit longer than required, made my heart race, even though he was always professional and focused on the material. The pivotal moment occurred one evening following an especially demanding seminar. I lingered behind to ask him some questions regarding the topics we had discussed, even though the majority of the pupils had already left. With the late afternoon sun creating long shadows on the wooden desks, the classroom was silent. "Professor Moreau," I said, attempting to speak steadily as I walked up to him. "Regarding some of the topics in Baudelaire's writing, I was hoping you could offer some assistance. I'm having some difficulty deciphering his use of symbolism." With a little smile on his lips, he raised his head from his papers. "Naturally, Camille. I'd be glad to assist. Would you mind taking a seat?" With my heart racing in my chest, I sat very close to his desk and tried to concentrate on the questions I had prepared. However, I found it harder and harder to focus as he began to describe the nuances of Baudelaire's poetry. He had a deep, smooth voice with a faint Parisian accent, and the way he discussed the text gave the impression that we were discussing a private, intimate secret. As the conversation continued, I became aware of a change in his tone and a slight alteration in the way he was staring at me. Now, his gaze was fixed on me rather than merely the words in front of us. Between us, I sensed a growing tension that was both exciting and dangerous. "Camille, you have an amazing grasp of these themes," he continued abruptly, his voice now lower. "However, I feel like you're omitting something more. Something you're keeping hidden." Unsure of how to react, I swallowed hard. "Professor, I'm not sure what you mean." His gaze was intense as he leaned slightly closer. "There is more to literature than just words on paper. It has to do with feeling and the human condition. I can tell you have a strong interest in this topic, but isn't there more to it?" My throat tightened each breath. The way he was staring at me left me unsure of how to respond. I suppose I've always been drawn to the darker, more complex aspects of literature," I mumbled, trying to maintain my composure. He gave me a slow, sly smile that made my skin crawl. "Well done, Camille. It indicates that you have no qualms about delving into the intricacies of the human soul. But exercise caution, because occasionally you can become consumed by the darkness if you approach it too closely." Unsure of what to say, I nodded. Something in his comments and the way he was staring at me seemed both like an invitation and a warning. An offer to join him in exploring something risky and prohibited by going into that darkness. I said, scarcely raising my voice above a whisper, "I should probably go. It is becoming late." He didn't look away or move. "Camille, you don't have to leave. If you would like, we may continue our conversation while sipping wine. Baudelaire is best understood, in my opinion, with a little fine Bordeaux." A beat skipped in my chest. I understood what he was implying, that this was going too far, and I knew that. However, the temptation was too great, and the attraction of what he was providing was too compelling to resist. I tried to sound tough when I answered, I don't think that would be appropriate, but my voice betrayed me by hesitating. He gently got to his feet and moved around the desk to face me. Now that we were so near, I could smell his subtle, woodsy, and elegant perfume and feel the warmth of his body. Relevant? His voice was sweet and captivating as he reverberated. Maybe not. However, occasionally the most memorable life events are ones that go against the grain. With my heart pounding and my mind spinning with contradictory ideas, I gazed up at him. I was aware that this was incorrect. I was his student, and he was my professor. He was almost twice my age. But I had never felt anything like the way he was looking at me and the way he was making me feel. I'm not sure, I muttered, my voice shaking. This could lead to serious problems for both of us. My heart raced when he smiled, a slow, sensual smile. Only if we allow it. However, if we exercise caution and keep this between us, nobody will ever need to know. His implication-laden remarks lingered in the atmosphere. I felt I should go and put an end to this before things got any worse. However, I was unable to move. I nodded, agreeing to something I knew I shouldn't have because I was pulled to him and the danger of what he was giving. All right, I murmured in a voice that was almost audible. A glass of wine. His eyes glowed with joy as he grinned. That's all I ask. I had never seen a room like the modest, private office he showed me next to the classroom. With bookshelves along it and a wide window overlooking the city, it was dimly illuminated. The scene in front of me was perfectly framed by the distant glittering Eiffel Tower. He sat down on the leather sofa and poured 2 glasses of wine, giving me one. After a brief moment of hesitation, I sat down next to him, my heart racing. I felt warm from the inside out thanks to the thick, smooth wine, but it didn't do anything to ease my anxiety. We discussed literature, Paris, and life in general. Now, however, the discourse was more personal and tense with our unsaid conflict. I could sense the change in the atmosphere as the night grew darker, and I could feel his eyes on me. He abruptly put down his drink and turned to face me, saying, "Camille, you are an amazing woman. Beautiful, passionate, and intelligent. You are worthy of being loved and recognized for who you really are." Unsure of how to react, I felt a flush come up my cheeks and glanced down at my hands. "Thank you, Professor," I said in a tremulous voice. "Julian," he clarified in a soft voice. "You may address me as Julian." "Julian," I said again, the name seeming both unfamiliar and familiar. I was forced to look into his eyes as he stretched out and gently raised my chin. "Caroline, you are unique. Never question that." Julian moved in and kissed me before I could react, before I could comprehend what was happening. He gave me an opportunity to draw away with the gentle, almost tentative kiss. However, I didn't. With my hands shaking, I reached out to touch his face and gave him a kiss in return. A passion that had been boiling beneath the surface for weeks was expressed in the lingering kiss. And even though I knew I should stop and that it was terrible, I couldn't bring myself to do it. The excitement of venturing into unknown terrain and the thrill of the forbidden were too strong to ignore. We were both breathing deeply and our hearts were beating in time when we finally separated. I glanced at him while a flurry of feelings, including perplexity, want, and guilt, raced through my head. "We can't, Julian," I muttered, my voice shaking. "This is incorrect." With his palm remaining on my cheek and his thumb lightly caressing my skin, he answered, "I know. I don't regret it, though. Do you?" I searched for any hint of skepticism in his eyes, but all I saw was honesty. I was afraid because he meant everything he said. In actuality, I didn't regret it either. However, that did not make it correct. I spoke more firmly this time. "We must stop. This cannot continue. It is unfair to both of us." With a wounded grimace, Julian nodded. "You're correct. However, that doesn't alter my feelings for you." I said, "I care about you too," before I could stop myself from saying it. "However, this is incorrect. We must maintain our professionalism." His shoulders slumped in defeat as he let out a sigh. I get it. But know that no matter what, I'm always here for you. There was tension and restraint in the days that followed. Throughout class, Julian remained professional and kept his distance, but I could sense the tension between us, the pull that had been getting stronger every day. Despite my best efforts to concentrate on my academics and my life in Paris, I couldn't help but think about that kiss and how Julian had made me feel. Then one night, following an especially exhausting day, I got a message from him. It was straightforward: I must see you. Would you be able to come to my office? As I read the message, my heart was pounding. I was aware that I should ignore it and avoid it, but the temptation was too great. I found myself making my way to his office through the deserted university hallways, my footfall resonating in the quiet. The door was ajar when I got there, and I paused for a second before opening it. With his hands clasped behind his back, Julian stood at the window with his back to me. The chamber was softly lit by the distant twinkling city lights. You arrived, he murmured in a low, passionate voice. I shut the door behind me and said, I shouldn't have, but I couldn't stay away. His countenance was troubled as he turned to face me. I've tried, Camille, but I can't fight this. I love you more than I ought to. This is more than a fleeting romantic interest. Something genuine is happening. His comments made my heart hurt, and I could feel tears in my eyes. We can't do this, Julian. It's too risky. I am your student, and you are my professor. If somebody discovered... He stepped closer and interrupted, saying, no one has to find out. This can remain between us. However, I can't let you leave without telling you how I feel. Tears clouded my vision as I glanced up at him. Julienne, I don't want to lose you. However, I also don't want to destroy your life or job. He softly removed a tear that had fallen down my cheek with his outstretched hand. If it means staying with you, I'm willing to take that chance. With tension and unspoken feelings permeating the air, the room felt as though it were closing in on us. I realized I was at a turning point in my life and had to decide whether to give in to the feelings that had been developing between us or to walk away and try to save my life. Julian drew closer to me and gave me another kiss before I could decide, this time with greater intensity and desperation. I lost my resolution and gave him a kiss in return, drawing him in with my hands tangled in his hair. The following few hours were a haze of feelings, including anxiety, guilt, and want. We lost ourselves in the moment as we succumbed to the attraction that had been building beneath the surface. Although it felt thrilling, I understood that it was wrong and that there would be terrible repercussions. After it was over, we laid on the couch together as the truth of what we had done began to set in. I had intense sorrow and shame, but I also felt a peculiar sense of fulfillment, as though I had finally found something that had been lacking from my life for a very long time. However, that feeling of accomplishment was fleeting since the consequences of our deeds started to hang over me like a heavy cloud. Knowing what had transpired between us, how could I carry on with my studies? Knowing that we had crossed a line that should never have been crossed, how could I confront him in class? Julian stretched out and held my hand, his touch warm and calming, as if he could sense my anguish. I apologize, Camille. I never intended to cause you harm. I understand, I muttered, tears running down my cheeks. However, Julian, we've messed up. I have no idea how to resolve this. He stroked the back of my palm with his thumb and said softly, we'll figure it out. I will always be here for you. However, his remarks were not very consoling. I knew there were no quick cures or simple solutions, and the reality of our predicament was too daunting. There was no turning back now that we had gone too far. Some of the most challenging days of my life were those that followed. I made an effort to be normal and concentrate on my schoolwork, but the guilt was getting to me. I felt like I was living a lie and was a fraud every time I saw Julian in class. The saddest part was that I was unable to bring myself to break up with him. Despite my anxiety and shame, I was unable to let go of our relationship. However, things got more problematic the longer our affair lasted. My life was being torn apart by the secrets and lies, and I knew that everything would eventually fall apart. It happened one afternoon when I heard two of my students talking to one another. They were discussing whispers and rumors regarding a student-teacher relationship. When I realized they were referring to Julian and me, my heart fell. Panic struck. Everything would end if the rumors got out, including Julian's job, my education, and our shaky relationship. I was aware that I needed to take action, that I needed to figure out how to put an end to the rumors before they got out of hand. That night, with my pulse racing with anxiety, I faced Julian. Julian, there are conversations. If this is discovered. His face was solemn as he gazed at me. I understand, Camille. I've also heard the rumors. We must exercise caution. However, what if it's already too late? With a quivering voice, I inquired. What happens if the harm has already been done? With a solid and comforting grip, he extended his arm to take my hand. We'll deal with it jointly. We will not allow this to destroy us. Even though I really wanted to believe him, the worry kept coming back to me and getting worse every day. The rumors persisted. In fact, they appeared to get stronger as a result of hearsay and conjecture. I sensed the walls around us, the pressure increasing until it became intolerable. Ultimately, I realized I needed to make a decision. Even if it meant separating from the man I had come to love so much, I had to protect myself and my future. I decided to leave Paris with a heavy heart in order to move to a different university that was far from the scandal that threatened to ruin us both. I knew it was the right choice, even if it was the most difficult one I had ever made. I had one last encounter with Julian on my last night in the city. As we said our goodbyes, the city lights reflected off the Seine as we stood on the Pont des Arts. Words could never express how deeply I felt or how painful it was to leave the man I had grown in love with, but I knew it was the only option. With remorse in his voice, Julian whispered softly, "Caroline, take care of yourself. I will always remember you." With tears in my eyes, I muttered, "I'll never forget you either." But goodbye. I experienced an odd sense of calm as I left him, Paris, and the life I had created. Although it wasn't the conclusion I had hoped for, I needed it. Even though it was painful, I knew that I was acting in the best interests of both of us.